Please welcome Professor John Butcher as we celebrate his induction into the Hamilton Boys High School Hall of Fame in recognition of his outstanding contribution to education and mathematics in New Zealand and around the world.
I've got lots of people to thank, but I'm not sure I can remember all the names. Certainly thank you, Stephen, for the kind introduction, and thank you especially Mr. Thussell for the school itself and the way that you've made a contribution to it, and for this invitation to me. When I walked out of the doors of Hamilton High School in 1951, it never occurred to me that to me that 64 years later, I would be speaking at the Hamilton Boys High School, or indeed that I'll be speaking at all. I'd like to believe that after all these years, I would have acquired some wisdom, that I would have some inspirational thoughts to share with you and to inspire you in turn. Well, what's this wisdom business? I've got over some immature ideas I had when I was young. That's the beginning of wisdom. But I really have no wisdom to offer, except perhaps the wisdom that I don't have any. There were some Hamilton High School teachers who had lasting effect on me, some good and some bad. I will say something about some of my interesting teachers. They were a source of inspiration, possibly negative inspiration, to many people of my age, including myself. But they have not been my only sources of wisdom, of inspiration. First among the teachers I admired was the headmaster, Mr. Grubb Tate. I have no idea why he was called Grubb, but this seemed to be the only name he was known by throughout the great city of Hamilton. When I transferred to the school from Tamaranui during year 11, he welcomed me personally and said that it would be all right if I didn't wear the correct uniform for a while. He knew my parents were not well off, and he did all I could to make things easy for us. The only classroom teaching he did was algebra, and this was for the class I was in. He had a simple motto: all algebra is factors. After a lifetime career in mathematics, I think this is a bit too simple, but it was a good starting point. His lessons consisted mainly of posing factorization questions, like, what are the factors of 3x squared minus 5xy minus 2y squared? To me that was pretty easy because that's all I did was mathematics. But the boy sitting next to me had no idea what to do. And he asked me to whisper the answer to him, and I tried to do that as best I could. The geometry classes taught by a different teacher were less friendly. The method of teaching was simple. The boys in the class were supposed to have memorized a theorem which they had to write down when the class began. But half of the class would have got it wrong, and the class concluded with these boys being caned. At the beginning of my last year at school, Mr. Tate wisely advised me to drop English from the scholarship course and to learn by myself 2 subjects, additional mathematics and mechanics, that were not actually taught at the school. So I had to learn those by myself in a quiet room. I was fortunate to come top of New Zealand in each of these new subjects, but at the expense of neglecting other subjects I should have done better in. Another inspirational teacher was Miss Giggs Campbell. She taught mainly girls classes, but she did look after the final year mathematics class, which had both boys and girls in it. She was a legend, both as a strict disciplinarian in her role as senior women teacher, and also as an ascending teacher of mathematics. One of the shames of my life is not doing well in her subject in the scholarship exam, after all her great teaching and encouragement. There's a story told by her and about her, that passed on from year to year. At a certain class during the curriculum, she would teach us how to draw a graph showing the cost of catering some event, in which there was a basic cost plus so much per guest. to try to explain how to draw a graph of this and to use it to solve simple problems about catering. He started by saying, let the guests be horizontal. Now, some previous pupil had jokingly said to her, Miss Campbell, it must have been some party. Now, this story that she told every year, remembering this previous occasion, the some party story, we all knew was going to come, and we sort of were ready for it, and we made exaggerated, humorous sounds when she told it. Mr. Nega Goodex was an inspirational English teacher. The love of literature that he had has been with me all my life, mainly from his influence. Polonius, Mr. Micawber, the Ancient Mariner, all seemed like real people to me. In some way or other, they seem to have been speaking directly to us. Apart from being a talented teacher, Mr. Goodex was a rose fancier, and there were many rose gardens in the school. I'm sure they're still exactly the same today, almost the same. And he would give demonstrations of rose pruning, which anyone that wanted to follow him could take part in. So every so often he would do this rose pruning demonstration, followed by boys and girls. That's the only time in the school year in which boys and girls were allowed to be in the same part of the school grounds. And I think really that rose pruning was popular for that reason. I didn't have a musical background, but I loved to hear the concerts by the school orchestra, even though the violins weren't all playing exactly the same note. One of the pieces of Schubert that was often performed is etched in my brain to this day, and my lifetime enjoyment of music, especially the music of Schubert, has been built on this. Other inspirations to me were the lives of some famous mathematicians from the past. One of these, Évariste Galois, was a great mathematician. He was only a few years older than any of you when he did his mathematics. In 1832, before he was 21, he was killed in a duel. He spent the night before his death collecting 3 of his unpublished manuscripts and sending them to someone who would look after them and make sure they became published eventually and known to the world. Several important parts of modern mathematics are named after him. The so-called Galois field, the so-called Galois theory in algebra. Another hero close to our own time was Ramanujan from India. He was a self-taught genius but couldn't get a proper university education because he neglected his other subjects and was held back from progressing to university. He worked as a clerk for a while, then got invited by a famous British mathematician, G.H. Hardy, to work with him. He suffered from bad health in the harsh English winters. When Hardy visited him in hospital on one occasion, his taxi number was 1729. Ramanujan immediately told him that 1729 is 10 cubed plus 9 cubed. It's also 12 cubed plus 1 cubed. The lowest number that you can write that way is the sum of 2 cubes in 2 different ways. Hardy was surprised that Ramanujan should know something like this. He seemed to treat every number like a personal friend. Now, Hardy was a famous mathematician in his own right. He wrote 2 biographies. One was the biography of Ramanujan, who died quite young, at age 34 or something like that, and his own biography. His autobiography was called A Mathematician's Apology. He wrote this as though there was something to be ashamed of in doing mathematics. He described it as a useless subject that could not have any value except the enjoyment of it as an art form. He was actually not correct in this because there's a formula called the Heidi-Weinberg formula, which is used in the subject of genetics to the state, population genetics to this day. But Hardy took no pride in that. He was only proud, to the extent he was proud at all, of his achievements in very arcane pure mathematics, which he did by himself and other people, and also with Ramanujan. Why should anybody study mathematics? Well, Hardy didn't think there was a good reason that except the subject itself. My father used to say to me, when you study mathematics, you will learn mathematics from people who learn it from other people, then I will become able to teach the same things to other people. And that was really a sort of a rather put down sort of joke. There are some answers to that, but I'm not sure I know exactly what they are. I think it's possible for people to do new mathematics, people to use mathematics for practical purposes, and people to pass on an appreciation of a beautiful science to other people. If Mr. Shakespeare Sr. has said to his son, don't become an actor and a playwright, all you do is be able to learn to teach other people how to act and write plays. Now, Shakespeare never built a bridge or dug a well in his life, but the world would be a worse place without him. Similarly, it's a worse place without the contributions of scientists and mathematicians. The mathematics I've learned has something to do with motion of objects acting under forces, such as the motion of planets around the sun. The differential equations which describe this sort of motion cannot be solved in a conventional sense, like you can solve x squared plus 2 plus what plus x minus 1 equals 0. We know how to solve that, but we don't know how to solve differential equations always. Sometimes we can, but usually we can't. So we rely on approximations. Now these approximation methods, so-called numerical methods, that's what I'm interested in, and which I want to learn more about. Thank you very much.